Hail, weary adventurer. This is the Traveler's Rest. Come in, stay a while, and listen, won't you? I have many stories to tell. Today, we're playing a little bit of a cult classic game called Demon's Crest. A nice little game that continued off of the Super Ghouls and Goblins IP. So, very, very cool game. Definitely liked discovering it later. And really, it's a game that touches on something that I want to talk to you guys about today. But before I get into that, I should probably go over some of the affairs in the kingdom right now. In the Midlands of the Northern Continent, we got a warm spell that's persisting. And we've thawed out for sure, but with it comes a very, very powerful gale that's sweeping across the plains. And quite honestly, I am thankful that I have some fortified buildings that I can take cover in from these horrid winds. And while I've been trying to hide out from the gales, and while I've been relishing in the admittedly warm weather that has chased away winter's chill, I have found myself nostalgic. And this game really isn't a nostalgic one for me, but it does give me a sense of nostalgia. So, what is nostalgia to begin with? Well, in quite literal terms, nostalgia means an old pain or an old scar. And there is some kind of pain that comes with remembering things that gave you comfort back when you were younger. It's a wanting, it's a desire. You feel like something's missing or something has changed so much since the last time you had indulged in something from your childhood or from more pleasant times. And this game is something that I had no idea about until I had, followed certain groups of Let's Players and so on. Whenever that came on the rise in YouTube in about, 2010, 2012, that kind of range. And the game captures an aesthetic that is nostalgic to me. Because I grew up, playing the Nintendo, Super Nintendo. I have a brother that's older than me, and he's the reason why I had gotten exposure to some of the greats in gaming. And this is a Capcom game, and this followed the design aesthetic of Capcom at the time, where in '94 they were producing things like Mega Man X, lots of bangers, and music that was awesome. But I had never actually played this game, and I never knew it existed until I had seen other YouTubers post it and do content on it. And so, this game is actually more of a newer enjoyment for me. I like how it has some really cool RPG and progression effects to it. It's similar to like Metroid, and I'm a huge, Metroid and Metroidvania fan. I can Metroid with the best, as it were. So I definitely get a lot of enjoyment from playing a game like this. And back to the topic of nostalgia, we see nostalgia in a lot of different forms these days, through different mediums and entertainment. And one of the things that I was thinking about in preparation for this week's episode was like, what's the good and the bad between having nostalgia for things? Is this something that people should be doing? Is this something that, has some kind of like universal truth in it or whatever, which I've brought that up a few times at this point, but I think these are just the things we become aware of as we go through this wonderful adventure we call life. And I think there are two ways to perceive nostalgia in games and film, and how you may even incorporate it into your own projects or passions and things like that. And that would be like the bad end of it. I have seen, and this is like getting into your old friends that you may have grown up with. I come from a fairly small town in the Midlands here, and everybody knows each other. Not too many degrees of separation, and some of those friends from my hometown I still keep in contact with, just because they've made the effort. Therefore, hey, it doesn't hurt to know what they're doing and talk with them every once in a while. But they are certainly of a certain type of person who may have done a little something called peaked in high school. As the kids say these days, I don't think something like that is necessarily peak, nor based. But I have heard them use language that kind of makes me scratch my head, because they're like, man, remember the days back, so-and-so, or when we used to do this when we were younger? I'm like, yeah, I remember those. Those were a lot of fun, but, I'm living in the present. And that's a very hard thing to do in and of itself. There's so many different things that, someone can worry about or be anxious about, or get melancholic thinking about some things in the past and how you might have done things different. But, there's not a whole lot you could change about that. And, as a result of being around folks like that and hearing them living in the past, I feel that is something it's not good for you. It's not good for you mentally. Not saying that you shouldn't do that at all for whatever reason. Just saying that if that becomes a generic state of mind for you, then, there's something that you could personally work on in that regard. I've caught myself doing it too. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, and there's always some we all are trying to be better about, right? I mean, we're now closing in on the end of February. New Year's, new me, new resolutions, all those kinds of things are going through our minds. And it's a little funny to be talking about the past when this is the season of resolutions. Oh, we got our big boy Arma here. Oh, I've watched your progress, and I'm glad I shall be the one to put an end to your petty crusade. This isn't a Let's Play, though, so back to what I was saying. These people who constantly live in the past, I feel like is an unhealthy thing, just because I feel like it makes you depressed, because you're constantly thinking about what could have been, and all this stuff. But my main point of thinking that way is, hey, we enjoy a lot of gaming and media and movies and stuff like that from ages where rules were a little bit different. And when you are not living in the present, the one thing I can say to that is, and this was like a very thought-provoking image, and it could have been like, you can think of it as like, I'm 14 and this is deep, but I've thought about it often enough that it's something that I keep in mind. The image had somebody that was blurred out and static, and it was a retro picture. Very, very nice, like little artsy piece. And it said, you can easily return to the past, but no one is there anymore. And that notion that, yes, the past is empty, really, really stuck with me. It may feel good to think about it, but what is it worth if there's nobody there to enjoy it with, right? So, not all things in the past are good either. Especially if we're talking in the realm of gaming or movies, you have movies that would use language that was contemporary at the time, but then you watch it now and you hear, oh, he dropped the little pigeon poop. Okay. So you have people that would use vernacular that is absolutely not okay today. Some of my favorite 80s movies, they have a few things in them that have slipped by, like the dreaded F slur. That is absolutely not cool to use anymore. So, no to that. And not to mention, just when things are younger or things are like in an age where things are still trying to get figured out, you also don't have all the quality of life that you would have today. So when you think about it that way, just you got to remember how far we've gone from those previous places. So we can learn from those lessons as well. That's why they are blunders. That's why they are something that we don't necessarily celebrate, because we need to learn from the lessons of the past in order to make something that's better. So, okay, let me figure out where I need to actually go here. I believe this bone place is where I need to go. Oh, overshot it. See, here's a good idea for you. They could have just given me a map to link up to different waypoints instead of having to, go around and do things a certain way and kind of free fly. But they had a technology that they wanted to showcase with the SNES, so there you go. That's why you have it that way. Alright, these guys aren't fun. Okay. So that's one way to look at it. There's quality of life, there's archaic designs, archaic viewpoints that are also trappings of those old times. And the fact that we had progressed beyond them is always a good thing. So that's what my perspective is on being stuck in nostalgia being a bad thing. There's a lot of blunders and lessons that we have learned from, despite the good feelings that may come with whatever it is that we're feeling nostalgic for, whether it's a game, a time, a feeling, because nostalgia is very much a feeling, or, could be a vibe even, but, yeah, so where does the good come in if we want to avoid the trappings, the negative trappings of nostalgia? Well, that would be like archiving. Having media preserved and accessible to us in this day and age allows us to go back and look at charming little cult hits like this one, Demon's Crest, that, it didn't spawn a franchise. It didn't get much more than just this. And a few people who were like, "Oh, hey, I remember this game," So you also have genres that are created with certain games and media and movies. And when those genres are created, it's always nice being able to go back and reference those genres or experience them again. There's plenty of games that I didn't grow up with that I have gone back and played just for the sake of like, oh, hey, this looked neat. This looks like something that I would have been interested in if I was, present in that age or whatever when this thing was relevant. And the fact that the archiving or the preservation of that media, of those games, allows me to enjoy it from a modern perspective. And when you have that availability, it allows a genre to persist. Anyone who thinks that, like, the boomer shooter FPS genre is dead is absolutely wrong. It has just evolved. Evolution happens. Evolution happens in nature. Evolution happens in ideas as well. So the genres that we see don't ever go away, I feel like. They just end up evolving and changing because what they're trying to do is they try to capture new audiences, and they're providing interesting twists to those that are already fans of that base. So in the process, you end up getting things that are considered evergreen. Something that would be considered like an evergreen genre of like game would probably be like the JRPG. The JRPG is an evergreen game that is still getting tons of attention now, and plenty of fans that just eat that up. Unfortunately, I'm not one of those people. I am very much somebody who I don't necessarily have the patience for JRPGs, and that's fine. Everybody's got their flavors that they like, right? So, no, there we go. This is a little rough. Oh, let's retry this. So, that's what we get. We end up getting foundations to other ideas that end up persisting and getting new iterations on them. Back to the example of the boomer shooter. Well, the boomer shooter, now you have Doom Eternal, and you have other games that are, taking the ideas from that, and they're, sorry. No, yeah, never mind. They are taking ideas from that and trying to do something new with them as time goes on and interests change. You can modernize an old genre with the quality of life updates and the conveniences that we know now. You can still capture a feeling of nostalgia or utilizing something that was very useful back then, or genre defining back then. But at the same time, what can happen when you start involving nostalgia, as if nostalgia is the focus of a piece of media, then I would call that bait, the nostalgia bait, because it wants attention sheerly for trying to make you remember the things that give you good brain chemicals. And it's not doing a service to creating something new or doing a twist on something that we had seen in the past. So what kind of examples of this are there? One of them would be nostalgia baiting in movies where, and I'm looking at you, Disney. Disney, I think, is one of the worst at this, where, hey, you remember The Little Mermaid, right? Hey, you remember Aladdin and the Genie. Sorry, we don't have Robin Williams anymore for him, but you'll eat it anyway. That kind of attitude, which is extremely cynical. Okay, damage boost. Okay. So yeah, that's why I think ends up happening in the movie space is you have nostalgia baiting in movies where they're not going to try anything new, because they think they already have your money by virtue of, hey, we're making you remember a thing. So there you go. Pardon me while I try to get this boss taken care of. Oh! And, I should have screened this. That was a joke that Kevin and Gene have been really fervent about making sure I don't forget about, based on some Halloween mishaps that happened last year. Just a short aside, there were some films on Shudder that had a little too much skin. Oh, they had a little too much skin, and I did not realize that. So, but yeah. So, back to the cynical examples of media. So for movies, you have the things that Disney does. I would also argue that Star Wars is one of those where we just have allowed ourselves to be nostalgia baited, where we just cannot get it. We don't get anything new. Try nothing new. Just do the things that make you remember all the feelings that you had, blah blah blah. That's not good. That's bad. That's bad movies. Very, very bad movies. So, you're not breaking new ground, and in that way. And when we look at the video game side of things, what happens when the video games try to nostalgia bait us? Well, what happens is we end up getting games that are not very worth our time, due to being like those cynical. They're very cynical remasters and ports. That's what I was trying to get at. Sorry, I'm a little distracted if you couldn't tell. And so, oh man. Well, I'll go try another level and see what we can get through that. Yeah, we have like this weird rash of ports and other things that are just, they're not up to standard that we should be having. Some of the ports are cynically made in the sense that, hey, remember this, you can play it again, but then whenever you go and play it again, it ends up being a subpar port because they took the cheapest option to try and get your nostalgia dollar out of you, right? And that's no good, because that means the nostalgia wasn't in service of preservation or something like that. It was in service of trying to get your money, which, yay, thanks for that. So, whenever we have that happen in gaming, we have events like the Star Wars Battlefront debacle, where EA absolutely cheaped out and made a worse port than the existing original port that's still supported and available on Steam at the time of release. So that's like, guys, what are you doing? Oh, that's what you're doing. You're trying to take my money. That's no good. No bueno. So then another example that I really, really don't like when it comes to games with their ports and remasters is when it's a port and a remaster of an MMO. Warcraft, I mean, don't even get me started on Warcraft. I'm not really... I am a former Warcraft player, and I have not played Warcraft since Warlords of Draenor. And even before then, I came back for like a short stint just because of that and a bunch of other things. At the time, I felt like Blizzard wasn't worth me giving money to. And so, that's just me voting with my wallet. I don't feel like I'm getting the product I'm paying for it, therefore I'm not going to spend any more of my hard-earned money on it. So, I was actually really disappointed in Blizzard, any more than I already was, when they came out with WoW Classic, because it was, oh, it's nostalgia baiting. It's everybody trying to relive the old days, living in the past, going back to a place where, nobody's there anymore. Well, yeah, why is nobody there anymore? Nobody's there anymore because, the game had progressed. The game had changed into a different kind of game. It evolved with the subsequent expansion packs that had come out. And Blizzard cynically went, oh, well, we know enough people are pining for the old days. We'll just give it back to them and still charge them for it, even though we're already charging them for a subscription fee. So I was like, okay, guys, this is absolutely, heinous, if you ask me. But I'm also just one person who doesn't agree with that, and other people have their own money that they can spend that on, and they get enjoyment out of it, and they feel like it's worth their time and money. So, free market, baby. And I'm not here to talk about free market, but that's an example of what I feel like is nostalgia baiting by a publisher, where you're not really providing anything new or anything that is, I feel like, worth my time, because you're not providing something that is inspired by the nostalgia. You're just providing the thing that people thought that they wanted. And what they end up getting back is a bunch of stuff that was some really, really bad quality of life, where, there was the painstaking effort of manually trying to put together groups without an LFG system, which, I don't think they're... Well, no, I'm not going to say that, because that's a generalization, and generalizing isn't a good thing to do in general. Isn't that funny? But it is an example of, hey, I think people forgot that certain things were a huge pain in the ass before they figured out a better way to do certain things that are now bog standard in a lot of MMOs now. Final Fantasy XIV, you have the duty roulette system. You had the LFG system come through in Warcraft eventually. And it made doing content and dungeons a lot easier, even though there's it automated a thing that was a pain in the butt, but it also streamlined things so that you could have people actually participate in the content in an easier fashion. So that's what I'm not really happy with, when games do nostalgia baiting and they're not inspired by it. Now, what are the examples where you have something where nostalgia is inspiring something that's newer or fresher? I would say the advent of the analog horror genre in film is one of those, where analog horror is very, very... It's new for using something that's old, but the style is, it builds horror through allowing you to there's not as much graphical fidelity with VHS, therefore you cannot pardon me therefore you cannot... Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. The lower graphical fidelity makes it harder for you to parse out the horror and the monsters and the things that drive suspense, which is used very effectively. You have things like Skinamarink, which was made extremely cheaply because it was VHS horror, and that film is very, very good. It's also a film that I would only recommend it to people who were interested in that kind of film, because I feel like the story in and of itself is very intense, and it's a little bit of a downer. So I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, but in my previous video, everything doesn't have to be for everybody, because then you don't get your polarizing, your things that make you think critically about things that you love in art and media. So, it's perfectly fine. Skinamarink really deserves that, and it really did a great job at bringing the analog horror genre to the front lines. And so, what we end up with is we have other things in the analog horror genre that actually did a really good job at being in an indie production. One that I personally followed for a long while before it finally came out in its entirety was Midwest Angelica. Midwest Angelica did the analog horror thing really, really well, and it didn't even use that much live action filmmaking because the creator wanted to tell this story that they had using Blender to animate certain scenes and sequences without it being something that felt derivative or felt like it wasn't inspired. That's because it was inspired by a genre, or not genre, but it was inspired by a situation where you can take advantage of a low fidelity that makes you think of a time when you were younger, or make good horror with it and do some great storytelling. So, other things that have used nostalgia well as an inspiration to do something new, I would say you have a lot of really good indie games that do the same thing, referencing back to old games like Banjo-Kazooie. Resident Evil and Silent Hill continue to inspire games that are similar to it, but you got people who are doing their own thing on it. One of my absolute favorite sci-fi indie games that has a retro aesthetic is Signalis. And Signalis did an amazing job at telling what's essentially a sci-fi Silent Hill story that, to me, was very gripping and compelling. I loved it. And I definitely encourage people to play that game if that thing is up your alley. So you get those kinds of games. You get Super Bonk. Super Bonk uses a low-res aesthetic to... it uses a low-res aesthetic to try and give you a sense of something old, but it's Vampire Survivors with a twist, which those kinds of games like Vampire Survivors didn't necessarily exist a long time ago. But here we are. So we have things that exist for us to reference, for us to learn from, because what ends up happening is nostalgia becomes a tool in the toolbox to tell something that isn't dependent on the nostalgia, right? And so these creators end up making something new that also feels old at the same time, which is really, really cool and really fascinating to me at the same time. So we have a lot of opportunity by looking back into the past as a reference and as a teacher, rather than it being something that we need to profit off of or entirely emulate. Because whenever you emulate it, you're not doing anything new, and you're almost trapped by the past in that regard. Just like I'm constantly trapped in these levels trying to figure out a way to get through some good old Nintendo hard age games. I know we got our jokes now about Crazy Kong mode and all this, or Funky Kong mode, sorry. or you fail enough times and the accessibility options kick in, which hey, it's perfectly fine. That allows people to tailor an experience for themselves, that it doesn't matter that you have to be highly skilled at a game. I say, the more availability that you can give to someone enjoying a game and experiencing it, that only helps everybody rather than helping the people who only want the challenge. Because I feel like that when you make things too challenging, then you end up eliminating a group that would otherwise want to enjoy the experience. So we have another lesson right there in some things are archaic. Whenever you have a situation like this with your good old-fashioned Nintendo hard games, someone would have rented this game, Demon's Crest, for a weekend and been like, this is bullcrap. This game's too hard. I don't care anymore. And they end up not experiencing the rest of the game and its ideas that would have otherwise had. Oh, man. And the game's ideas and the experience that it was trying to offer. So, we need to be conscious of that kind of thing whenever we're thinking about old games that, oh man, they were just good. They were just built different. Yeah, they were. They absolutely were built different. They had a lot of constraints. And I'm a firm believer that when you have constraints for a creator, those limitations end up making them innovate in a way that is groundbreaking, genre-defying even. Just depends on the situation and who you have at the helm for a production. So, we've spent quite a bit of time reminiscing on things from the past and taking a look at old artworks and old games, and I get weary. I'm tired, and I think I might turn in for a little snooze, my friend. I bid thee well, and I will see you next time in the Traveler's Rest, where we can have our next stimulating conversation. Thank you.
He will be the one who was born to claim the song.